Good morning, everyone. My name is Armin Alcejo. I'm with the product marketing team here at Fluke Calibration. I am excited now to have our first live stream here on YouTube and introduce CalStudio, which is our newest calibration management software. This actually just came out last Monday, just a couple days ago, but we have Michael Johnson here, who is our software applications product manager, to demonstrate it for you all. And without further ado, I'm going to have Michael come on the screen. Great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Armin. Let me make sure I know what we have going on here. So I apologize for whatever may happen today as we figure out how to do these live streams. If I end up on the wrong screen, I'm sure you guys will let me know in the chat that you can't see what I'm trying to do. So I'd like to start out just kind of walking through a little bit of an overview of what CalStudio is and what we're trying to accomplish with this. And I'll set the stage here that this is our launch for the US right now that we did on Monday. And as we move forward into next year, we'll start releasing in additional regions. So for right now, it's only available in the US, but what we have here is going to be what we expand on and build on. And I'll talk about, what types of functionality we're adding down the road, where we're going with this, and then we're also going to show a live demo of actually using the application, walking through where we are today, and talk about how we can use that to improve the efficiency in our calibration labs, and also as equipment owners who want to keep track of their calibration status. So let me make sure I am showing the slides now. Excellent. So we will go ahead and I just want to start with kind of an overview of what CalStudio is. So CalStudio really is the culmination of multiple years of effort here at Fluke to really design the next generation of calibration software. And CalStudio is a single solution that is designed to address the entire calibration workflow end to end across all measurement disciplines. When we think about calibration software, a lot of times we find ourselves painted in these corners where we've built a system that is specific to a given measurement discipline, and we end up not well addressing the rest of those types of measurements, the rest of the ways that we think about calibration. So what we've attempted to do with CalStudio is build from the ground up something that's going to address the full workflow in a consistent way, and have that be something that is efficient, easy to learn, and really a step forward for what we have to offer. There are four key elements that make up CalStudio. The first is the Laboratory Information Management System, which is where you manage your assets, manage the work that's being done, and tracking all of that information. And we'll walk through some of the key features there this morning. The second piece is the procedure authoring environment, which is going to allow us to create low code, no code, drag and drop type procedures, right? As a longtime MetCal user, we are moving away from writing code to write procedures and making that something that's much simpler and easier to do, and have that apply consistently across all those measurement disciplines, starting with manual calibrations here in the initial launch, and then moving into automated calibrations as well as we move forward into future releases. The third element is the calibration execution environment, where we run those procedures that we've authored, built on our universal measurement model that allows us to consider all the measurement parameters and all of the attributes and pieces of the measurement uncertainty and the measurement equation, the measurement formula that are at play, so that we can address all of those disciplines consistently in the same way. And then the fourth piece, which is really where we're going to set things apart from many of the offerings that exist today, is the workflow integration manager. So what we find on average is that there's 4 to 5 disconnected data sets in any given cal lab, where we're having to double data enter or copy and paste or create flat file integrations. And so what we want to do with that module when we add it in the future is allow us to really easily connect and make CalStudio a part of our existing ecosystem and get the data where it needs to go in these other systems without a lot of effort and work to do that. So simplifying the way that we integrate, simplifying the way that we interact with our systems on the whole. So just to touch on some of the reasons that really led to CalStudio as an offering, right? We've been doing calibration software at Fluke for a really long time. MetCal and I were born in the same year, and I often joke that I will never get rid of MetCal because if I do, I'm worried that I will also disappear. So MetCal lives on and will continue to do so, including with CalStudio, where we will integrate MetCal with this as we move forward. But as we look at kind of where the market is right now, it is becoming increasingly difficult to find skilled technicians to work in calibration labs. And that's been the trend for a number of years as our sources of those technicians shifts, as we have increased complexity, increased demand for accreditation, and the additional quality requirements that come from that. And then additionally, from a technological perspective, right, this shift toward cloud-based technologies is because it has become more expensive to maintain our own systems internally, right? Looking at things like MetTeam, MetCal, where these are locally installed on our own servers, maintained by our own teams, that becomes very expensive to do. And so more and more, as cloud technologies have improved and become more accessible, we've been able to find so many applications out there that are moving that way because it makes it easier for us as customers of those types of systems to maintain that at a reduced cost rather than having to staff an entire IT department to do that. So as we look at how we think about these things within CalStudio, right, starting from the top there, where compared to where we've been, right, really simplifying those workflows, making them more efficient, allowing our technicians who may not be as experienced or who may just be starting out and learning through on-the-job training more than the traditional type learning, we're able to build those types of workflows that are easier for them to learn, and in changing things like how we write procedures, making that easier to pick up and really start without the additional training needed. And then having our audit readiness really driven by a system that is built around metrology. Right, we often say that our software is built by metrologists for metrologists because we have teams of people who really understand this industry and have worked in it. Between Mike Brown and I were, I think, 40 or 50 years worth of experience in calibration as an industry. And we're trying to build something that we know we would have wanted as customers and we want to share with the industry now, because of what we're able to do with some of these new technologies and the way we're able to build and grow from where we've been. And then the fact that we're building this in a cloud-based architecture, really using the latest in technologies there and what's grown so extensively over the last few years and what's available from cloud service providers, and to be able to build on those learnings from other cloud-based systems, we're really able to leverage those learnings and build something that's truly next generation for us. So a few areas I want to highlight here in terms of how CalStudio really provides that value before we dive into actually seeing this. The first thing I want to highlight is just simplifying those lab operations, right? And there's a few different ways we think about doing that. I mentioned the procedure authoring, and one of the key differences here is when you think about a procedure in something like MetCal or even in some other systems, right? It's very much a singular entity that contains all sorts of information. It contains how we selected those test points, what those test points are, what the tolerances for those are, what the uncertainty of the standards I'm using is, and all of that is kind of in this singular package, where with Qubit a few years ago, we started thinking about how to separate those things out into individual data entities and then combining them dynamically. Lost my train of thought. So what that allows us to do with CalStudio is approach procedures in a way where we're able to, instead of having individual procedures that map from a specific device or a specific group of devices, we can take that much larger and think about combining those data types in ways that are more dynamic to cover larger portions of the workload in single procedures, to where we can write one procedure that can be run in multiple configurations, as well as apply to a much broader scale of an entire category or an entire type of instrument, that allows us to then do that with a single procedure and cover all of those, because we pull in those other data sets at the time of run or at the time of calibration. And then taking all of that and having that be in a centralized system in the cloud, So it's easy to access. All of our data lives in one place, and also making that easy to connect with those other systems, but still having that source of truth for us on the calibration side. And then building all of that obviously into a system that is built around those quality requirements of having to track those changes and really driving that from the very beginning. Thinking about our efficiency and the savings that we drive out of that, some of this is for the future state, right? We're building toward this in our future releases. Things like dashboards that are customizable and allow us to really hone in on, for a specific part of our organization, what metrics matter to them and how we track that, and think about things like not just turnaround time or how well we're meeting that turnaround time target, but the amount of repair work that's going on, or the time we're spending on maintaining certain types of devices. All of that can be built into these dashboards to really look at how do we improve where we are, how do we think about our efficiency as an organization. As we move forward in the automation side, adding batch calibration and full automation to maximize our throughput, a lot of what we see in the calibration software space to this point has been really focused on that automation piece. And certainly that's a big part of optimizing and improving the way we run our Cal labs. But beyond that, I often talk about the act of calibration as a very small piece of the overall calibration workflow, right? When we think about bringing the equipment in to putting it back to our customers, the time we're spending actually doing the calibration is a portion of that. We want to make sure that we are doing that efficiently through things like automation, and as we build out into things and improve how much we can automate, improve how we automate, certainly an area we want to focus on. But then in addition to that, we really want to reduce the decision points that happen throughout that workflow. So thinking about, we found that on average in a given Cal lab, a technician spends 1 hour a day looking for technical data. And that's one of the things that drove Qubit when we launched that, to really find a way to centralize and create a place where it was easy to find what we were looking for. And leveraging that same type of data now in CalStudio, we have this product catalog of over 800,000 instruments that we can leverage directly as we build out our assets, as we think about what equipment we have, and then moving forward into things like our procedure catalog, our procedure library. All of that links back to this idea of having less effort go into all of the extra work that goes into doing calibration, and allow us to more quickly get into the act of calibrating and get that work out the door to back to our customer. And then the last piece I'll touch on here before we go into the demo is our ability to scale, right? So much of what we talk about with CalStudio is about growing the business. That's really what we're driving toward for our customers, is allowing them to do more with what they have and expand and find efficiencies that they can improve on, and then grow the business from there to do more. When we think about standardizing across our organization and doing that within a structure that allows us to really map the organizations within CalStudio to map exactly how we think about our organizations, it really makes it easier for us to view exactly where things are within that. And then, as I mentioned, with the integration piece, being able to integrate that as a part of our existing ecosystem without all the extra work, and making that a simple, straightforward thing to do, allows us to really build this into something that's a core part of our experience working as a customer of a Cal lab, or as a Cal lab inside of a larger organization. And then lastly, with thinking about compliance to standards, right? Things like ISO 9001, ISO 10012, ISO 17025, all of these are driving specific requirements. And as we see more and more labs needing to become compliant or accredited to these standards, we need to have a system that is built around that concept, and having tools as we add future features that allow us to do that much more simply, and give us the things that we need more readily available in order to provide or meet those requirements very effectively. I apologize. I'm just getting over being sick. So with that, I'm going to switch out here, and we will move into CalStudio itself. So I'm logged here into CalStudio. This is a preview environment that I'm in, but very much reflects what the current state of CalStudio is that we launched on Monday again in the US. So right now I am inside of a organization called manufacturing. And if I go look at my company here, I can see this tree view of the organization that I am logged into. And so we've got our calibration lab here, which has its own set of assets that belong to it. It has members assigned to it. But within that, we're also keeping track of, as an internal calibration lab, right, who are the owners of those assets within that. And so we can see here in the engineering department, we have these specific assets, or in manufacturing, we have these specific assets. And so we can assign assets, we can assign users to individual components or segments of our organization internally. And what this allows us to do is internally we have all of our internal users who are able to view the information for their assets on their own, right? Having really an internal customer portal almost, but inside the same application. So it's a consistent experience across the board. There's no separate app, there's no separate license to have. It is all a part of the structure of CalStudio. And what this really does as well is open us for us to offer this type of solution to not just people who are doing calibration, but the owners of those assets themselves who may just want to track the work that's being done elsewhere. And so that's kind of a new area for us where this is really well suited to do that for asset owners in addition to our typical Cal labs. So if I look at my kind of dashboard area here, right now in this initial launch, we're just looking at, right, a simple kind of listing of what's coming due, what's out for service. So I switch now to the engineering organization. We have a couple of assets that are due to be worked on, and we can see here, right, as soon as I log in, I'm seeing exactly what is coming up due for calibration. I can send that to the lab and get it to be worked on. And from within this, I can also see, right, the assets that are assigned to my specific organization, as well as the entire company based on the permissions I have configured here. If I look at, any of the items in this list, we have this really quick access to information. We call this our omnidirectional data access, where we are able to see information and even make edits to that information directly in the same screen we're in without having to navigate away. We want to keep everything very centralized. We often talk about metrology forensics, where as a metrologist, right, you're needing to track down a piece of information, and where you're starting from is often different, right? Maybe we have a serial number and we need to get to some record from 5 years ago, or maybe we have that record and we need to figure out what it touched over the last 6 months. So all of those things are really built into the way that we think about the experience within CalStudio to make it easy to get to anywhere from anywhere, and in many cases not even having to navigate away and being able to view that directly in that space. So we have that side pop out, but we can also view the full record of this asset as well. And we can see here that we have those same kind of peek and poke type structures on those records as well, where we can look at who is the owner of this, right? The catalog that refers back to our product catalog data, where this is linked to that information directly in the catalog. When we have work that is done on this, we can see those services here, which we'll show you after I get done with actually running a calibration on this equipment. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. Is we had those two assets that were coming due, and we'll go back and you can see it's our barcodes 1000 and 1001. So I'm going to go in and create a work event, but I'm going to do that by logging into the lab here and acting as my kind of receiving clerk or my manager or someone who's receiving those assets. And I am going to, if my mouse, there we go. So here in the work events, I'm going to create a work event. So a work event is kind of a collection of work that is one or more assets that we're doing work on as a lab. I'm going to select my customer here that I am doing the work for, which is engineering. And you can see I can add things like if my customer gave me a work order ID or there's a certain purchase order I need to use for this, I can add those types of information here. If this is an on-site, maybe I'm designating those dates. I'm going to go do that here in the work event record. And then I'm going to save and move forward. And this is where I select what assets I'm going to do for this work event. And I have a barcode scanner here, and I've got some barcodes prepared for those specific assets we were looking at. I'm just going to show you that I can really quickly scan those barcodes, add those items to this work event. This also will search on additional fields, right? So you can see there it says search on the asset, barcode, the ID, or the serial number. So if you've seen, on the back of a Fluke meter, for example, we have the serial number barcode there. We could scan that, and if that was in the system, it would also pick that up by the serial number. So it's a more flexible search, really looking at those multiple fields to find what we're looking for. And then as we look at each of these, we can change things like the priority as we're building this work event, and I can assign them to myself or someone else to make sure that shows up on the technician side in the execution environment, which I'll show you in a moment. So I'm going to publish this work event and open it. So now we can see here, if we go and look at this work event, you can see the work items within that, the two pieces that we're going to calibrate as a part of that. You can see my priority is shown up here, and we can make edits to that. Maybe this one's less important. So now I'm going to switch over, kind of take off my lab manager or receiving clerk hat and put on my technician hat. And I'm going to switch to a different application here within the CalStudio environment, which is CalStudio Conduct, which is where we conduct our work, where a technician would log in on their day-to-day to actually run calibration procedures. So you can think of these as separate apps, but they're really built around the same architecture. They have the same login, they use the same credentials, and you can see I seamlessly moved between the two when I did that. So here we've got our list of work, and we can also filter things by things that are assigned to me. We can look at our Calibrate here. We can look at the work items that are here. And so I'm going to start this procedure for this first, this is the one I wanted, because I actually have my caliper here with me. So I'm going to run that caliper procedure. I'm going to select this procedure. And you can see that I've got my list of available procedures here. We'll talk about the authoring environment in a bit and show how we built those procedures and how much easier it is to do that. But for right now, I'm going to run this procedure for the 500 series caliper. And when I select that procedure, the first thing I'm going to get is a preview of what that looks like, so that I can really see and make sure that this is what I'm expecting, this is what I expect to run. This procedure has been reviewed and approved and put into a live state for me as a technician to use, and we'll see that it is possible to, if there's an issue, set that back to a draft state so it's no longer visible. We have a procedure right now that's in draft in the system that you could see I could not see. Only those two that were active were available to me as a technician to use. In the future, this will be able to be linked to training requirements for technicians or to specific types of instruments when we think about our service catalog when we get there in a future release. So all of this kind of builds on itself and expands from where we are today. So I'm going to start this calibration. And this is what our execution environment looks like. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some standards. And I didn't print out barcodes for this one, but I'm going to add this. Doesn't make sense to calibrate a torque wrench with this, but oh, no, you're right. I used the wrong one. My bad. I misunderstood Mike's notes. All right, so here's my gauge block set that I've added now as a standard for running this caliper procedure. And that was the same type of scan that I did earlier. I just didn't have a barcode to scan, so I typed it in. One of the key differences here with CalStudio with procedures is that all of our instructions are built into the procedure itself. Right, so you can see, wearing gloves, placing the gauge blocks on a surface plate, which I have a wooden table we're going to use as a stand-in surface plate today. But all of that is built into the actual procedure itself rather than a separate set of written instructions. You can embed GIFs in here, you can embed videos, and really build out a set of instructions and a set of almost on-the-job training inside of a procedure to make sure that your technicians are able to be successful in what they're doing. So with that, I am going to put on my gloves here. to protect my gauge blocks. And then you can see there's a lot of different types of tests we have here. The first one, right, this is just a task that we're being given to clean the caliper, right? And so I can mark that as complete, and I get a pass result from that. Up across the top, you can see the status of this changing. As soon as we started running this procedure, the status of this work item changed to in progress. And then over on the left, we can also see the kind of outline of this procedure and the pieces that we've completed versus not yet done. As we look through here, right, pass-fail type checks, visually inspecting the jaws. They look pretty good to me. And then as we move down here, right, sets of instructions, go ahead and turn that on. I'm being told to raise this. This is going to be awkward. I don't feel like I don't know what to do with my hands. All right, and so now outside measurement, open the calipers and place over the gauge block. And you can see down here, I've got 3 test points that are set up just for this demo purpose. So I've got my 1-inch gauge block, and we will take a measurement, and it reads exactly 1 inch. So I'm going to enter that in here. And then I can tab into my next field and move right to the next test point, which is 3 inches, which read 3 inches exactly. And I can tab now to my last one, which I'm not going to be able to pick up because I had to ring these together, and my ringing capability is not as good as it used to be. All right, and we got 6.0010. And you can see as we're running through that process, as we enter that data, it is immediately giving us a pass-fail result. It's showing us on that nice little scale where our result falls in that. And I'll just kind of show you if we move a little bit more, right? You can see, whoops, not that far. There we go. So you can see it scales and moves through that as we enter that data. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this procedure. And that's going to give me now a preview of what those results are going to look like. So if we scan through here, this is almost identical to what's going to come out in our results at the end, because from the very beginning, when we author the procedure, when we run the procedure, when we view the results, it's a very consistent experience so that we're able to design the outcome from the beginning and know exactly what to expect. So we look through this, we see all of our pass conditions. We can collect things like our as found as left, intolerance, our next calibration date is being set automatically. I can capture my temperature and humidity data if I want to. And then I'm going to capture a nice comment here. And I'm going to save those results. So just looking at here kind of what that report would look like, right? We can see the PDF. We could export that PDF. We could export it as a JSON data package to then import somewhere else, or we can print this. As we complete all of our work and go back to doing that, we would see, right, as we complete all the items in this work event, we could close those out and then go back and view the results having updated in the limbs. And so what I'll do here is I'll just show that inside of the work event record here, you can see that this item has moved to in review, where it's waiting for a quality representative to review that data and approve it, which there's a workflow to go through that and do that and then close out the work event as a whole. Once that happens, I'm actually going to switch over to one I did earlier in the manufacturing side, where I can look at, on the asset side, this asset. Earlier this morning, I completed this service through that type of work event process, and it updated now the due date for this based on that service record. And as we complete additional services, whether that's a calibration or other types of services, we add the availability of those, things like preventative maintenance, things like, I don't know, putting it on your head. Maybe there's a put the caliper on your head service. This is the peril of letting Michael do anything live is I'm not gonna think of an example to use when I want to think of an example. Those will all be updated in that same kind of stream of information about what's been done to this unit over time. So really easy to find that and easy to view that from one place. So the next thing I'm going to do is I will move into Compose and show the procedure authoring process. And I am not logged into the lab, so I'll do that. All right, so here we have 3 procedures that are currently saved here. We have a folder structure. We can organize our procedures, keep track of. These are all my procedures for electrical. These are all my procedures for physical dimensional, that type of structure, or however we want to organize them to really make it easier for us to keep track of them. But you can see here that those 2 procedures I saw earlier are the 2 that were available as published, whereas this one for the torque wrench was not. And if I go in here and edit this procedure, I can see what that looks like. I can see the instructions that have been built, and maybe I found that the spec here on this test point was wrong, and I need to change it to 239 to 261. And now I save that, and if I go, jumped out too fast, if I change this status, did I mess up huh? Cancel. Oh, there it is. It's in the row. We moved the button. So now I can publish this, and now it's going to show up. If I go back to conduct here, and I look at the items in this work event, and I look at this item here, which was the torque wrench, and I start procedure, that procedure is now available in my listing. Right, so it's live connection between my authoring, what I publish, what I allow to be available, and what is available for the technicians. So that's a kind of key takeaway there. As I'm going to start a new procedure here, I'm just going to demo how to do that from the beginning, which I think I probably messed up by switching. There we go. Test procedure demo. So we can keep track of, right, things like what is this procedure for. We can add a new section, and then within that section we have all these different types of components that we can add to the procedure. On the left here is a whole panel of what's available today, and that available list will continue to grow, and we'll add different types of tests, different specific tests for a given discipline that we require specific steps to happen, or specific functionality for a given instrument. But we also have these more generic components where we're starting from, where we can ask for a text input, right? And ask something like, what is your name? And if they enter it, maybe we give it a pass or a fail. And then the really core kind of structure of CalStudio today with doing a calibration procedure is the comparison component. And what that allows us to do is within that, we can select the function that we're going to test and the subfunction, about the type of instrument we're testing and how we're doing that measurement. So looking at this list here, this is a list of all these different types of measurements we can do, and a lot of these you'll notice are not things that, right, Fluke typically sells hardware for, right? So the point here in thinking about, for example, torque, and then within the subfunction we have all these different options to select. What this is built for is our point level uncertainty and traceability, so that we're able to really keep track of not just that an asset was used on a specific work event, and so we know that we need to review that whole thing in, for example, a recall event, but it's really around point by point what parameters were used and what parameters were affected, so that we can really drill down more effectively without all of that kind of overhead that comes in with those types of events, where I recall personally going through an issue with a tolerance scope option, and I had to look at all of the things that calibrator had touched over the past year, and many of them did not use the scope option at all, but there was no differentiation in the system of which parts of that standard were used, and that's really where this allows us to dig deeper than we really ever have before, where we're linking these together at a parameter and function level. So I'm going to add the clockwise function here, and you can see that that built this out, and that's going to also affect our unit of measure that we can use later. And I'm also able to check and have multiple test points, or sorry, the number of test points, and I can also have within each of those test points the number of readings I want to take. I can change the unit, which is going to be a filtered list based on that parameter and function we selected. So maybe we're doing Newton meters here. We can enter our nominal, our lower and upper limit, set up our pass fails. Maybe we want to allow them to skip this. If this was maybe the counterclockwise and we don't calibrate our counterclockwise, we could have this be a skipped section or an NA section, whether we want to make that mandatory, whether we want to show that in the report. So all of this, as we're building through this, is going to build out not just how the technician will see this procedure as we run it, but how the results will look on the other end coming out of this process. With that, I'm going to go back to, how are we on time for this? Okay. So I'm going to come back here to the lab area. I'm trying to remember, Mike, if there was another area I'm forgetting that I was going to show. Okay. What I'd like to do at this point is give a little preview into something we're adding in Q1 of next year, which is Optical. So Optical is an AI image analysis tool that we've been working on that allows us to take readings from devices that don't have a remote interface. So things that have often been referred to as non-automatable, things like calipers, micrometers, right? Handheld DMMs, we're not able to interface with those and take a reading over a remote interface and having to type that in. Instead, being able to use a normal webcam to then capture that reading automatically. So I'm going to have us go to a quick video that we recorded earlier just to show that so that it's not so loud in here with the calibrator sitting next to me. Hi, I'm Michael Johnston. I'm the Software Portfolio Product Manager for Fluke, and as we get ready to launch CalStudio, we're already looking ahead to what's coming next. So in our release early next year in Q1, we are excited to be launching Optical as a part of the CalStudio execution environment. So I'm going to show you a demonstration of what that's going to look like. And this is an early demonstration where my Optical demo here is going to control my 5560 calibrator through a USB to serial adapter from the browser without any installed software on the desktop, on the computer. And it's going to take readings from the DUT, the device under test, using my webcam. So Optical is a new AI-based image analysis tool that allows us to take readings with both digital and analog displays through really any webcam of sufficient quality. No special camera required, no special positioning or pre-training required. You put your tool in front of it and it just works. So I'm going to demonstrate how this is going to run. This is a demo execution environment that's going to look very similar to what the execution in CalStudio will look like. But I'm going to start this run, and then I'm just going to show you, I'm not touching anything right now. And as you can see, the 5560 is being controlled, so it has set the output there. And then with this webcam, it is taking a reading from that device under test and entering it into my reading on the procedure itself. So as we move into the next quarter, and as we integrate this and instrument communication with CalStudio, we're going to see this type of functionality available there to really drive forward the next stage of automation, focusing on things that traditionally have been referred to as what we jokingly call non-automatable. And some other great examples of that is if you think about your calipers, right, or your micrometers, where typically you're having to, pick up the device, put your gloves on, pick up the device, pick up your gauge blocks, take the measurement, set it down, take off your gloves, type in the number. Instead, we will be able to, with a camera over the top of this process as I'm calibrating, give a voice command to capture that reading as a part of a procedure run in CalStudio. And all of that will again be integrated into that CalStudio executive environment. And as I mentioned, there's no special cameras needed, there's no special orientation. that is required or special pre-training as we start running these types of procedures. The training all happens ahead of time in the models that are used to recognize what's in these displays. And so that allows us to very quickly and easily switch to any new device that we're using. It really only cares about having that display there to work with. We're also working on analog displays to be able to work with things like pressure gauges or dial thermometers and other types of devices so that we can continue to move forward and expand and increase the functionality of CalStudio and Optical, as well as our other tools that we'll be adding over time. Thanks for watching this preview of what Optical will look like in CalStudio. And if you want to know more, feel free to reach out or reach out to sales. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed that sneak peek into Optical that will be added next year inside of CalStudio. So that will integrate with CalStudio procedures, just like I was showing earlier. And that kind of leads into a good kind of next topic, which is where we're going, and also specifically around instrument communication and how we are going to integrate that and build the automation side of CalStudio. So I want to just show here, look at our roadmap at a high level. So right now, what we've launched here in Q4 is really the basics, right? We're starting out, we're getting, addressing kind of a subset of our customer base here with asset owners and internal labs that are not accredited. And so as we add functionality over the next few quarters and beyond, really, we kind of build up what types of customers will be able to be supported in CalStudio. So talking about instrument communication specifically, where we're going to start in Q2 of next year is with communication through serial, USB, Bluetooth, all through the browser. So one of the really cool things that's going on right now technology-wise is that unlike in the past where you had to have something installed on the desktop, on your laptop to communicate with instrumentation, there is new technology with the Web Serial API where we can actually talk to devices through those interfaces directly from the browser. So from within CalStudio, running in the browser, we can talk to those types of devices, and that's where we'll start. And then Q4 of next year is where we'll really build on that into things like GPIB, where we do need to have a desktop app in order to talk to those types of remote interfaces. So as we're moving forward, right, we're adding that functionality over time, building upon that a piece at a time. So to answer the question of, right, what types of interfaces are we going to support? Really any. It's just a matter of where we add that and when we add that, and then building upon that over time. And then additionally in that Q1 launch is when we'll add the Optical piece there, and the initial integration with MetCal. So all of your thousands of MetCal procedures that you spent hundreds of hours writing, myself included, will integrate with CalStudio as another way to get data into CalStudio, starting out with an integration through MetConnect that we launched back in 2019 to allow us to integrate MetCal with other systems. We get to benefit from our own work here and integrate through that. Looking forward to Q4 of next year, we'll have a more direct integration with MetCal, similar to what we have with MetTeam today, unlocking all of those features that don't currently exist in MetConnect around data access and things within the CalStudio data that we can leverage today in MetTeam. We'll have the same type of structure there in Q4 next year. In Q2, we'll do the initial pieces of that workflow and integration manager that I mentioned to build on our ability to integrate with other systems. We'll also be working on additional pieces on the procedure authoring, going beyond what we've got here and really looking at some specific areas, some specific types of work, as well as expanding what we're able to do instrumentation communication-wise there. Where we really move, I think, forward into the future with that is thinking about instrument communication much more dynamically than what we've done in the past. Thinking about MetCal and the way that we have to write procedure code in MetCal that's very specific to a given instrument, really taking it a level higher and making that more dynamic so that we can define a procedure that, again, linking back to that parameter and function type structure that we're addressing on the uncertainty side, that also builds into the procedure and the instrument communication side, where we can define for a given parameter and function, what types of instruments, which instruments can support that of a given range or a given way to do that measurement at a really granular level, and then mapping those together to say, for this procedure, I need a device that can generate this type of signal with this type of uncertainty, and then finding which devices we have configured or available that support that. And then rather than having really specific structures from a programmatic perspective of how to do that, we're able to then create a mapping for this parameter and function with this type of instrument. These are the commands that need to get sent to that to make that happen. And so making a library of that allows us to be much more flexible in the way that we approach instrument communication as well, kind of starts to be built there in that Q2 release. Q3 is really where we focus on making accreditation easier, right? Thinking about the areas where we want to focus in and do more for accredited labs to make it easier to maintain that and easier to get there. Is going to be a huge focus in Q3 of next year, really building on the foundation that we've laid here with the universal measurement model and going beyond and really expanding the feature set there to make it easy to do things like manage a scope of accreditation and link to that when we're doing our reported uncertainty and all of those things happening there. And then across this whole next year, we're going to be seeking things like SOC 2 compliance from a security perspective, seeking things like FedRAMP certifications so that we can be available to these other types of customers. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning here, launching in additional regions beyond just the US as we move through the year. So working with the teams in those regions to kind of figure out how we do that. But over the next year, we'll be launching globally throughout the rest of the world. Any other specific questions that have come in that would be good to address out loud?
There was a question about Optical and existing PXEs, which I answered in the chat, but you might touch on just a little bit more about Q1 and Q4, the big difference there on Metcal.
Yeah. So with the Metcal integration, the question was around existing procedures and existing PXEs. The intent is very much that Metcal will live on in perpetuity for as long as I live. And so it's really important to us that we find a really effective way to integrate Metcal with CalStudio. So the first way we're going to do that is in Q1, leveraging MetConnect, which already exists as a way to integrate Metcal with other systems, to get the data from Metcal procedures that we already have with nearly all the functionality that's there in Metcal. There's some limitations with things like pulling data from the database that just isn't there in MetConnect, or Cal due date checks that leverage the other system to do that. So CalStudio would be the one really checking to make sure your standards are in calibration rather than Metcal doing it at runtime. So all of that aside, the core functionality of Metcal remains, and we're able to get that data into CalStudio through MetConnect. And then looking ahead to Q4 is when we add in all the rest of that with the really full-blown integration like we have with MetTeam today. But from the beginning, right, wanting to get to the point where we can launch a Metcal procedure from within CalStudio and have that seamlessly pull that data back in on the CalStudio side and just become an integrated part of your normal CalStudio workflow. With Optical, that is another piece that I'll mention here, is we'll also be integrating Optical with Metcal. So you'll be able to write Metcal procedures that leverage that same functionality that we'll be adding in CalStudio procedures to have Metcal procedures that leverage the AI image analysis, pull results off of an instrument that doesn't have a remote interface. We've had exciting proof of concept work there that we just need to now move forward and finalize during that same release period.
We have a couple questions in the chat. Can external report generators be used to get data from the database, like SSRS, Power BI, Grafana, etc.?
Yeah, so this kind of touches on the workflow integration manager. So there's really three key ways that the workflow integration manager is going to make data from CalStudio available and make other systems available to CalStudio. The first is through open APIs. So that will be kind of that first available piece where for any type of system that is able to leverage an open API, you'll be able to do that and connect to those systems, and we'll have the documentation for those. The second piece will be through the Microsoft Power Platform. So things like Power BI, Power Automate, we will have data connectors within CalStudio that allow us to build connections to that, build Power BI dashboards around that data very dynamically and very in depth to however you want to do that. I talked about the dashboards within CalStudio, thinking about those kind of a configurable like widget type approach, but taking that data into Power BI through that Power platform is going to be much more extensive in terms of what you can do. And then the third approach will be a full iPaaS or integration platform as a service, where we're able to build custom workflows, custom triggers right inside of CalStudio, right? It'll be embedded in CalStudio as another app like I showed, Compose, CalStudio Compose, CalStudio Conduct, and the main CalStudio application with the limbs. It will be a fourth option there where we can build those workflows directly in the application. So between those three pieces, that's how you would take the data from CalStudio and get it into other places. So unlike MetTeam, where you have the database living on your system and it's one database and there's a structure to it, CalStudio being built on cloud-based architecture, there's multiple databases, there's multiple ways that we put those data into different places depending on what it is. And so what those types of integration pieces with the APIs and those others allow us to do is have kind of a front-facing layer that you can interact with in ways that absolutely allow you to build those types of reporting structures without having it be, we have a report or a Crystal Reports class that we teach for 3 days on MetTeam, that half of that class is just understanding the database architecture and where all the tables are to look for the data that you're looking for. So we want to kind of back away from that type of solution and really think about this from a more structured and modern approach to that type of reporting.
What about supporting government labs that have restrictions on cloud services?
So what we've found in talking to those types of customers is that it really comes down to finding the right people to talk to. More and more more and more government organizations are having cloud-based architectures and cloud-based offerings inside of their organizations. FedRAMP is a big goal for us to get to because that really unlocks some doors there. When you have an application that is FedRAMP compliant and is certified and on the FedRAMP marketplace, that makes it much easier to get through those gates. But we'll also have things like virtual private cloud and GovCloud. Oh, yeah, it's on the slide. If I look, that will be specific for those types of customers to make sure that we are able to provide for them in the way that they have those requirements set up.
Can CalStudio replace MetTeam? How does the licensing work? Will it have a customer portal?
So, really good questions. 3 questions, really. So, replacing MetTeam, yes. So the expectation is by the end of next year to be at essentially parity with the core functionality of MetTeam. That's really where we're going here. So, and it's important to note that MetTeam is going end of life next year. So June 30th of 2026, we will no longer be selling new installs of MetTeam. You'll be able to continue to buy additional licenses for your existing MetTeam installs through the end of 2027, and then support for MetTeam will end at the end of 2029. So MetTeam will be replaced by CalStudio, yes. Licensing, there's really 3 different kind of groupings of the licensing with CalStudio. The first is the limbs. The second is procedures, so that's authoring and execution kind of grouped together. And then the third is the workflow and integration manager. Within each of those are multiple tiers of functionality, multiple tiers of features included, really to target different types of customers at different price points. So the best way to talk about pricing is really to reach out to your Fluke sales rep, and we can walk through, right, based on what your lab looks like, what does that map to in terms of, one, what's available today, but also where we're going and what that would look like in the future, even if we're not ready to support you in the current state just yet, or if you want to get started and get kind of a demo instance and see what it looks like and get your hands on it, that's something we can absolutely do. The third piece was...
Will it have a customer portal?
Customer portal. So that's one of the things about the laboratory information management system is internal customers will just be additional users inside of CalStudio directly. CalStudio, the laboratory information management system, has an unlimited number of users. We price that per lab. And so it's the number of labs actively doing work, but all of your internal customers, you'll be able to add them to their parts of the organization. They'll be able to log in and see their information for their part of the org. So internally, there's no separate customer portal. In the future, for commercial labs, yes, there will be a customer portal that'll have a similar type structure where you'll be able to add your customers to that as an add-on for those commercial labs.
Will CalStudio support the DCC, Digital Calibration Certificates?
Yeah, so very much a big part of where we're building toward here. So thinking about the parameter and function type structure that I mentioned, that's really building toward that capability to do that. Fluke has been heavily involved in the DCC to this point and kind of having those discussions. The universal measurement model is a big part of how we're seeking to address that, thinking about structures and data structures that are built to enable those types of interoperability, interchangeability of data, very much where we're going, yes. When will we get a export data file of the DCC template? TBD, right? Where does that fall in our roadmap? Probably depends a lot on when we launch in Europe, for example. But that is very much the intent, is to support those types of efforts within CalStudio.
When will it be available for the rest of the world?
Great question. To be determined. We're still working on things internally. Obviously, with this new type of offering, where it's a subscription offering rather than a traditional one-time sale, there's a lot of things to figure out, as well as how we sell that through in areas where we have distributors and things like that. So over the course of the next year is my answer at this point, but hopefully sooner rather than later. And I'm working with the teams internally to figure that out.
How many LAN devices can be controlled in Metcal?
Well, if we're talking about the device under test, just one. You can only run one device under test at a time in Metcal. Within the user-defined standards, if you are using a version of Metcal that supports user-configured instruments on the LAN bus, which I believe was added in version 11 or possibly 11.1. Don't quote me on that. I think it was 11. Really would be as many as you can configure an instrument for, which I think number of configured instruments I want to say is limited to 32. But that could just be GPIB instruments. So we're really pulling out of left field with me on that one.
Last question. If we currently have Met Team with Gold support, can we migrate to CalStudio using the same licenses, or will new licenses be required?
Yeah, so CalStudio is an entirely new thing, and it is subscription-based. Unlike Met Team, that was a perpetual license purchase. You bought it once and you had that forever. We do have an opportunity for a discount on CalStudio in your first year if you have Met Support Preferred, which is another US-only offering right now. For that subscription type where it's automatically renewing your Met support. If you have Met support preferred, there is a discount on your first year of CalStudio as long as your Met support preferred is active when you make that transition. But other than that, no, there's no migration of licenses or anything like that, because we are moving into a very different licensing model here. And that is a good point of time here to kind of point out, if you do want to know more, if you want to have a conversation about where it makes sense to move into CalStudio with you, what that would look like cost-wise. First place I'll recommend is the Fluke website. We now have a page. If you go to just fluke.com, right in the top right is a link to CalStudio, the product page. On there, you will find a demo walkthrough that you can view on your own live without any kind of login or anything. There's videos like the one we showed on Optical. There is additional information around what that is looking like, articles, kind of building out that structure around, what does CalStudio do for you? And then if you want to learn more, there's a link there to reach out to sales from there, or you can reach out to the person you typically work with on the Fluke sales side, and they can set up a meeting to go through CalStudio more in depth with you. All right, so I want to thank you all for joining us. This has been fantastic. My throat is dry and I need to go drink water for an hour. Make sure to subscribe to the Fluke Calibration YouTube account so that you can see more events like this coming up, and be sure to check out CalStudio.